The paintbrush slipped from my hand, splattering cerulean blue across the hardwood floor, but I didn't care. Ethan's lips were inches from mine, and the air between us crackled with a forbidden heat that made my heart stutter. I'd hired him to repaint my San Francisco apartment, a straight guy with a toolbox and a no-nonsense attitude. But now, 3 weeks into the job, his so-called professional boundaries felt like a game designed to unravel me. How had I, Noah Caldwell, a man who'd sworn off love after too many heartbreaks, fallen so hard for someone who claimed he wasn't even playing my field? It started innocently enough. I'd moved into this fixer-upper in the Mission District, a charming but dated one-bedroom with peeling wallpaper and scuffed floors. My friends called it a project, but I saw it as a fresh start, a canvas to rebuild my life after a brutal breakup with my ex, Julian, who'd left me questioning my worth. I wasn't looking for love when I posted that ad for a painter on a local job board. I just wanted someone reliable, someone who could make this place feel like home. Enter Ethan Harper, a 26-year-old contractor with a disarming smile and a portfolio of flawless work. His reviews glowed. Professional, efficient, trustworthy. Perfect, I thought. Safe. When Ethan showed up that first day, I wasn't prepared for the man who stepped through my door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with blonde hair that caught the morning light like a halo and green eyes that seemed to see right through me. His gray t-shirt hugged his chest, and his jeans were just tight enough to make me look twice. Okay, maybe 3 times. Noah, right? He said, extending a calloused hand. His voice was warm, like a shot of whiskey on a cold night. I nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of my own appearance. A slightly rumpled button-down, hair still messy from sleep. Let's get to work, he added, flashing a grin that made my stomach flip. We settled into an easy rhythm. Ethan was all business, measuring walls, taping edges, and laying out drop cloths with military precision. I'd work from home, stealing glances from my laptop as he moved with quiet confidence, his muscles flexing under his shirt as he rolled paint across the walls. He'd hum softly, old rock tunes, mostly, and I'd catch myself smiling at the sound. But it was his rules that threw me off. No personal questions, he said on day 2, pointing his paint roller at me like a teacher scolding a student. Keeps things professional. No distractions. I laughed it off, assuming he was just setting boundaries. But the way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking, that wasn't professional. That was dangerous. By the end of the first week, the apartment was transforming, soft creams and bold blues breathing life into the space. But so was something else. Ethan's rules started bending. He'd ask about my day, his tone casual, but his gaze intense, like he was memorizing every word I said. He'd brush past me in the narrow hallway, his arm grazing mine, leaving a trail of heat that lingered far too long. Once, when I handed him a glass of water, his fingers closed over mine for a split second longer than necessary, and I swear the room tilted. Careful, Noah, he murmured, his voice low. You're gonna make me mess up this wall. I laughed, but my heart was racing. Was he flirting? Or was I just projecting, desperate for a spark after months of emotional drought? The tension built like a storm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting a golden glow over the half-painted living room, Ethan broke his own rule. So, what's your story, Noah? He asked, leaning against the ladder, paintbrush dangling from his hand. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious, searching. I hesitated, my guard up after years of navigating a world that didn't always embrace who I was. Not much to tell, I said, deflecting. Just a guy trying to make this place home. He didn't push, but the silence that followed felt heavy, charged with unspoken questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every touch. Ethan was straight, or so he'd implied. He'd mentioned an ex-girlfriend once, a passing comment about a high school sweetheart. So why did his presence make my pulse race? Why did his rules feel less like boundaries and more like a challenge? I was 28, too old to be this flustered, but something about Ethan made me feel like a teenager again, hopeful, reckless, alive. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. I wore my best-fitted shirt, left an extra button undone, and offered to help with the painting. Thought I'd get my hands dirty, I said, grabbing a roller. Ethan raised an eyebrow, smirking. You sure you can handle it, city boy? His teasing tone sent a thrill through me. We worked side by side, the air thick with the scent of paint, and something else, something electric. When our shoulders brushed, neither of us pulled away. "You're not bad at this," he said, his voice softer now, closer. I turned to reply, but he was already looking at me, his face inches from mine, his breath warm against my cheek. I froze. The paintbrush in my hand felt like a lifeline, grounding me as my heart pounded. "Ethan," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. But before I could say more, he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Gotta finish this wall," he said, his tone clipped, his eyes avoiding mine. I stood there, paint dripping onto the floor, feeling like I'd just been punched in the chest. Was I imagining things? Or was Ethan fighting something he didn't want to admit? The next few days were torture. Ethan showed up every morning, same as always, with his toolbox and that damn smile. But something had shifted. He was more guarded, his rules back in full force. No personal questions, no lingering glances. Yet, I caught him watching me when he thought I was distracted, his green eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite name. I wanted to call him out, to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I was just a lonely guy reading too much into a straight man's kindness? I threw myself into work, hoping to drown out the confusion. My job as a graphic designer kept me busy, but the apartment was small, and Ethan's presence was inescapable. He'd switched to painting the bedroom now, and I'd find excuses to linger nearby, pretending to organize books or fold laundry. One afternoon, as he worked on the accent wall, a deep navy I'd chosen on a whim, he broke the silence. "This color's bold," he said, not looking at me. "Suits you." My heart skipped. "You think you know me that well?" I teased, testing him. He paused, paint roller mid-stroke, and turned to face me. "Maybe I'm starting to," he said, his voice low, his gaze steady. My breath caught, but before I could respond, he turned back to the wall, leaving me reeling. That evening, I invited my best friend, Marcus, over for moral support. Marcus was the opposite of me, outgoing, unapologetically loud, and fiercely protective. Over takeout tacos, I spilled everything. Ethan's rules, the lingering touches, the almost moment that had left me questioning my sanity. Marcus leaned back, smirking. "Sounds like your straight painter's not so straight, Noah. He's playing you like a fiddle." I shook my head, unconvinced. "He's got an ex-girlfriend, Marcus. He's not, you know." Marcus snorted. "Honey, plenty of guys don't figure themselves out until later. Trust me, I've seen it. He's giving you signals. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus's words stuck with me. The next day, I decided to push back. Ethan was finishing the bedroom, and I leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. "You ever break your own rules, Ethan?" I asked, keeping my tone light but pointed. He froze, then turned, his expression unreadable. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, but there was a tremor in his voice, a crack in his armor. I stepped closer, heart pounding. "You tell me," I said, holding his gaze. For a moment, neither of us moved, the air between us thick with tension. Then, his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, muttered something about a supply run, and was out the door before I could blink. I felt like an idiot. Had I pushed too far? That night, I sat on my couch, staring at the half-painted walls, questioning every choice I'd made. My life had been a series of calculated risks. Coming out at 17, moving to San Francisco, building a career in a cutthroat industry. But this was uncharted territory. Ethan wasn't just a crush. He was a puzzle I couldn't solve, a risk I wasn't sure I could afford. When Ethan returned the next morning, he was different, quieter, almost somber. He worked in silence, and I didn't push him. But as the day wore on, I couldn't take it anymore. Did I do something wrong? I asked, standing in the kitchen where he was prepping paint cans. He looked up, surprised, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in his eyes. "No, Noah," he said softly. "It's not you. It's me." My heart lurched. "What does that mean?" I pressed, stepping closer. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head. "I don't know how to do this," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Do what?" I asked, my pulse racing. But he just looked away, grabbing his tools and heading for the door. "I'll finish tomorrow," he said, and then he was gone. I stood there, alone in my half-finished apartment, feeling like the walls were closing in. Ethan was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what. But the more I chased, the more I wondered. Was I chasing a dream, or was he leading me somewhere real? The next day, Ethan showed up late, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. He avoided my eyes, focusing on the trim around the windows with an intensity that felt forced. I wanted to confront him, to demand clarity, but something in his posture, shoulders tense, jaw tight, stopped me. Instead, I busied myself with work, stealing glances as he moved through the apartment. By noon, the silence was unbearable. "Ethan," I said, setting my laptop aside. "We need to talk." He froze, paintbrush in hand, and for a moment, I thought he'd bolt again. But he nodded, setting the brush down and wiping his hands on his jeans. We sat on the couch, the space between us feeling like a canyon. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I don't know how to say this," he started, his voice low. "I'm not," he trailed off, frustration etched across his face. My heart sank. Was this it? The moment he'd confirm he was straight, that I'd misread everything? But then he looked at me, his green eyes raw with emotion. "I've never felt like this before, Noah. Not with anyone." My breath caught. "What are you saying?" I asked, leaning forward. He swallowed hard, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've always thought I was straight. I dated girls, never questioned it. But then I met you, and it's like everything I thought I knew got turned upside down." His words hit me like a tidal wave, hope and fear crashing together. "So what? You're saying you're interested?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but I'm scared, Noah. I don't know what this means, or how to do this." I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance, but I held back. "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said softly. "But you need to be honest with me, and with yourself." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the weight he was carrying. Years of expectations, of a life he'd never questioned until now. "I want to try," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "With you." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ethan went back to painting, but the air between us was different now. Charged, but softer, like we'd crossed a threshold. When he left that evening, he paused at the door, his hand lingering on the knob. "See you tomorrow, Noah," he said, and the way he said my name felt like a promise. Over the next week, we tiptoed around this new reality. Ethan was still cautious, his rules replaced by a quiet vulnerability that made my heart ache. He'd share small pieces of himself, a story about growing up in a small Oregon town, his love for classic rock, his dream of starting his own contracting business. I shared too, opening up about my past, my fears, the way Julian's betrayal had left scars I was still healing. Each conversation felt like a step closer, but also a reminder of how fragile this was. One evening, as we sat on the floor sharing a pizza, Ethan reached for my hand. His touch was tentative, like he was testing the waters, but when I laced my fingers with his, he didn't pull away. "This feels right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I smiled, my heart swelling. "Yeah," I said, "it does." But the world outside my apartment wasn't as kind. San Francisco was progressive, but not everyone in Ethan's life was ready to accept this version of him. A few days later, he got a call from his older brother, Ryan, who'd heard through mutual friends that Ethan was spending a lot of time with some guy. Ryan's tone, even through the phone, was sharp, judgmental. Ethan hung up, his face pale, and I could see the doubt creeping back in. "Maybe this is a mistake," he muttered, staring at the floor. My stomach twisted. "Do you really believe that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. He didn't answer, and the silence felt like a knife. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan was still coming to finish the apartment, but his brother's call had cast a shadow. He was quieter, his smiles rarer, and I could feel him pulling away, wrestling with doubts I couldn't reach. I wanted to fight for him, for us, but I knew pushing too hard could break whatever fragile connection we'd built. So, I gave him space, focusing on the apartment, which was nearly done, walls vibrant, floors gleaming, a reflection of the home I'd dreamed of. If only my heart felt as complete. One afternoon, as Ethan worked on the final touches in the kitchen, I decided to try again. "You don't have to do this alone, you know," I said, leaning against the counter. He glanced at me, paintbrush paused mid-stroke. "Do what?" he asked, but his tone told me he knew exactly what I meant. "Figure out who you are. What you want," I said. I'm here, Ethan, but you have to let me in. He set the brush down, his shoulders slumping. It's not that simple, Noah, he said. My family, they're not like yours. My brother thinks this, us, is some kind of phase. And maybe he's right. His words stung, but I saw the pain behind them. Do you think it's a phase? I asked, stepping closer. He looked at me, his green eyes conflicted. No, he said finally, his voice raw. But I don't know how to be this person. I don't know how to lose everyone I've ever known. My heart ached for him, for the fear I knew too well. Coming out had cost me friends, family, pieces of myself I'd never get back. But it had also given me freedom, and I wanted that for him. Then let's figure it out together, I said, reaching for his hand. He didn't pull away, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. That evening, we talked, really talked. He told me about his childhood, about the pressure to be the perfect son in a conservative family. I shared my own story, the years of hiding, the liberation of finally living my truth. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. The next day, Ethan surprised me. He showed up with a small canvas, a painting he'd done, a vibrant abstract of blues and golds, inspired by the colors of my apartment. Thought it'd look good in here, he said, a shy smile tugging at his lips. I was floored, not just by the gift, but by what it meant. He was trying, in his own way, to build something with me. I hung the canvas above the couch, and when he stood beside me, admiring it, our shoulders brushed, and this time, he leaned into me. But the outside world wouldn't let us be. That weekend, Ryan showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen when I heard the knock, followed by Ethan's tense voice. What are you doing here? He asked. Ryan's response was cold. Heard you're getting too cozy with this guy. Thought I'd see for myself. I stepped into the living room, and Ryan's eyes narrowed, sizing me up like I was a threat. He was taller than Ethan, with the same blonde hair, but none of his warmth. So, you're Noah, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. The one messing with my brother's head. I felt Ethan tense beside me, but I kept my voice calm. I'm not messing with anyone, I said. Ethan's a grown man. He makes his own choices. Ryan scoffed, turning to Ethan. You're throwing away your life for this? For him. Ethan's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he'd back down. But then he stepped closer to me, his voice steady. Yeah, Ryan. For him. And for me. My heart soared, but Ryan's face darkened. You're making a mistake, he spat, then stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan stared at the floor, his hands trembling. I reached for him, but he shook his head. I need time, Noah, he said, his voice breaking. I'm not ready for this. Before I could respond, he grabbed his jacket and left, leaving me alone with the echo of his words. Ethan didn't show up the next day, or the day after. The apartment was finished, walls perfect, colors vibrant, but it felt empty without him. I tried calling, texting, but he didn't respond. Panic crept in, mingling with the ache of rejection. Had I pushed him too far? Had Ryan's visit broken him? I replayed every moment, every touch, searching for where I'd gone wrong. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about me. Ethan was fighting a battle I could only witness, not wage. Marcus came over that weekend, his usual bravado softened by concern. Give him time, Noah, he said, handing me a coffee. He's got a lot to unpack. Family stuff, identity stuff, it's heavy. I nodded, but the waiting was agony. I threw myself into work, into decorating the apartment, but every corner reminded me of Ethan. The paint splatter on the floor from our almost kiss, the canvas he'd painted hanging above the couch. I missed him, not just the idea of him, but the man he was becoming, the one who dared to step into the unknown with me. On the third day, I found a note slipped under my door. Ethan's handwriting, messy but unmistakable. Meet me at Baker Beach, 6 p.m. I'm sorry. My heart raced as I read it. Hope and fear colliding. Baker Beach was a quiet stretch of sand with views of the Golden Gate Bridge, a place I'd mentioned loving during one of our late-night talks. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I had to go. When I arrived, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the waves. Ethan stood near the water, hands in his pockets, his blonde hair ruffled by the wind. He looked tired, but when he saw me, his face softened. I'm sorry I disappeared, he said as I approached. I needed to think. I nodded, keeping my distance, giving him space to speak. Ryan's always been my rock, he continued, his voice thick. But he doesn't get this. He doesn't get me. Not anymore. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. I've spent my whole life doing what I was supposed to. Good son, good brother, good straight guy. But with you, Noah, I feel free. Like I can be who I really am. My heart pounded, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. I'm not saying I have it all figured out, he said, his voice trembling. But I know I want this. I want you. I closed the distance between us, my hand finding his. Then we'll figure it out together, I said, echoing my words from before. He smiled, a real smile, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. We stood there, watching the waves, our hands intertwined, the weight of the world lifting just a little. The next week was a whirlwind. Ethan came back to the apartment, not as a painter, but as something more. We talked, laughed, shared stories over coffee and late-night walks. He was still navigating his identity, still grappling with his family's expectations, but he was trying, and I was falling for him, hard. One night, as we sat on the couch, the canvas he'd painted glowing in the lamplight, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft, tentative, but it set my heart on fire. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. That felt right, he whispered. I smiled, my voice barely audible. Yeah, it did. But life wasn't a fairy tale. Ryan wasn't the only one who disapproved. Ethan's friends, his old life, started pulling at him, questioning his choices. I could see the toll it took, the way he'd tense when his phone buzzed with another judgmental text. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the world, but I knew he had to face it himself. All I could do was be there, steady, unwavering, as he carved out his truth. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Ethan was all in, or at least trying to be, but the world wasn't making it easy. His brother's silence was deafening, and his friends' pointed comments wore him down. Yet, every time he walked through my door, his smile was a little brighter, his touch a little bolder. We were building something real, something worth fighting for, but I knew the cost was high for him. I'd been through it, coming out, losing people, rebuilding. But Ethan was new to this, and I could see the fear in his eyes, even when he laughed. One evening, we went to a local bar, a cozy spot in the Castro where I felt at home. Ethan was nervous, his hand tight around mine as we walked in. Heads turned, not out of judgment, but curiosity. Two handsome guys, clearly together, were bound to draw attention. We found a booth, and I ordered us drinks, trying to ease his tension. You okay? I asked, brushing my thumb over his knuckles. He nodded, but his smile was strained. Just a lot, he admitted. I'm not used to this. I squeezed his hand. You don't have to be. Just be here, with me. The night was perfect, until it wasn't. One of Ethan's old friends, Jake, walked in, his eyes narrowing when he saw us. He approached, his voice loud, cutting. So, this is what you're doing now, Harper? Playing for the other team? The bar went quiet, and I felt Ethan tense beside me. I wanted to stand up, to tell Jake to back off, but Ethan beat me to it. Yeah, Jake, he said, his voice steady. And I'm happier than I've ever been. Jake scoffed, muttering something under his breath, but he left. Ethan's hand trembled in mine, but he didn't let go. That moment changed something in him. He started opening up more, not just to me, but to the world. He told his parents, bracing for rejection, but they surprised him with cautious support, promising to try to understand. Ryan was still distant, but Ethan didn't let it stop him. He started joining me at community events, meeting my friends, finding his place in a world he'd never imagined. It wasn't easy. There were tears, doubts, late-night talks, but we faced them together. 1 year later, the apartment was more than a home, it was ours. Ethan had moved in, his tools mingling with my books, his paintings brightening every room. We'd built a life, not just walls and colors, but love, trust, and courage. One evening, as we stood in the living room, the canvas he'd painted still hanging proudly, he pulled me close. I was scared I'd lose everything, he said, his voice soft. But I gained so much more. I smiled, my heart full. We both did. Our story wasn't perfect. There were still battles, family tensions, societal judgments, but we faced them side by side. Ethan's journey, from a straight painter with rigid rules to a man embracing his truth, was a testament to the power of love, not just for each other, but for ourselves. And as we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that no matter what came next, We'd paint our future together, one bold, beautiful stroke at a time.